Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry, and today I have on the line with me Lenora Billings-Harris. I'm excited because Lenora has been speaking since 1986, so she's been in it quite a while. The content Lenora speaks on is diversity and inclusion, and that includes speaking to leaders, HR professionals, customer service people, healthcare, and more. Lenora speaks in the U.S. and internationally. She is based out of North Carolina. She has written 2 books. The first one is called The Diversity Advantage, A Guide to Making Adversity Work. And number 2, Trailblazers, How Top Business Leaders Are Accelerating Results Through Inclusion and Diversity. Lenora, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're sure welcome. We're glad to have you today. Lenora, let's start out by having you tell us about your speaking business. We want to know who you are speaking to, what are you teaching them, and how are you helping them?
Well, as you could imagine, the broad topic of diversity and inclusion is one that impacts everyone in one way or another. So I specialize in the topic rather than in a specific industry. And so the majority of the people to whom I speak are leaders in any industry and HR professionals who are looking to create a culture of inclusion within their organization. And then secondary to that, I would say my next largest group of people are associations, because I deliver keynotes at conventions quite often. So it's usually association conventions and conferences, or HR conventions and conferences.
Now, when you say inclusion, what do you mean by that?
Well, when I started this work many years ago, we just referred to it as diversity. And then someone, I don't really know who, I would love to be able to know who the person was that kind of changed this. But somewhere along the line, about probably 10 years ago, we started, those of us in this space, referring to it as diversity and inclusion. And that was brilliant because I think we assumed, those of us doing this work, that we assumed that if people were wanting to learn something about diversity, meaning the diversity of people with whom they work or live in a community, that of course the reason to do that would be so that you could become more inclusive. That was not a very good assumption to make. And so, like I said, around 10 years ago, the word inclusion was added. And specifically what that means is not only recognizing the many differences that are among us as human beings, but recognize it so that each of us can become better able at including individuals different than ourselves on our teams, on our workforces, being more comfortable in our communities, that type of thing. So the inclusion, the diversity part is simply recognizing the differences among us in a positive way so that we can be more respectful to each other, that type of thing. The inclusion part is the action piece. What can I do to be more effective in including people different than myself? So most of my work these days is involved with helping my audiences and my clients when I'm working long-term internal to their organizations to help them understand how unconscious bias impacts us on a daily basis. That is to say, all of us have biases, and when we recognize that we all have them and we can become more aware of whatever they might be, then we can mitigate them and have stronger teams and attract better talent, the top talent, and that talent will stay with us in our organizations.
Okay, who are you speaking to the most? Is it business owners, or is it kind of divided up evenly?
Well, it's sometimes business owners. Most of my work is focused on mid-sized to large corporations, and so it could be any number of people within the corporation. So, of course, the ideal with any type of change or culture innovation, the ideal is to start at the top with the CEO or the president. That doesn't necessarily always happen. It may start with the vice president of sales or the vice president of finance, whoever might happen to be the champion within the organization. And then, of course, sometimes it's the chief diversity officer or chief diversity officer or the vice president of HR. And in my consulting work, so when it goes beyond the training programs or the keynotes, the consulting work does start with the highest level folks in the organization, so that we can come together as a small group and make sure that whatever actions are being taken are actions that relate to and support the overall business goals, not just diversity-related goals, but the overall business goals, the market share they're going after, or the type of talent they're trying to attract, that kind of thing.
Okay, so the first book you wrote was The Diversity Advantage, A Guide to Making Diversity Work. Was that born out of the information you are helping your clients with?
Yes, interestingly enough, that the original version of it, it's now in its third edition. So the original version was written back in 1998, I believe it was, when it came out. And what I realized was, in my training sessions, the same kinds of questions were asked all the time. And that gave me the idea of, write a book that actually answers the questions, or at least gives people some information on how to go about thinking about some of those questions, such as, what is diversity and why should I care about it, and how does it impact my workplace? Do I need to be politically correct, and why is it important to say this versus that? It's that kind of a book. It's very much a primer on diversity and inclusion, and really gives individuals a heads up on, here's some things that you can do in order that you are most effective in the workplace, which is generally the most diverse place people are in their daily lives. And so that book has been very popular over the years, and why it is now in its third edition. Of course, I keep updating it and adding more information. Like now the third edition has information in it about generational diversity and gender diversity and that type of thing.
Okay. So based off your first book, you're teaching and speaking on, now correct me if I'm saying this wrong, kind of an umbrella of how to get along, how to recognize how people are different and how you can work together better and that kind of thing. Would that be correct?
That would be exactly right. It's really a more or less a handbook for the individual contributor in an organization that wants to have ideas and suggestions on ways to interact more effectively with everyone. So it really is, oftentimes what I say to people when they ask me what I do is, the bottom line is I teach people how to get along.
Okay, interesting. Now, what qualified you to do that? How did this come about? How did you become the expert on that?
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, when I started my business in 1986, many of my colleagues who had been in business, well before me, they said to me, now that you're external, you have your own business and you're external consultant, you need to either become an expert in a topic or in an industry. And this was in 1986, as I mentioned. And right about that same time was when in the United States there was beginning to be more focus on diversity in the workplace. And so many people said, oh, you should do diversity work. And previous to that, I had worked for General Motors. I had worked for Cigna Corporation, so very large corporations, either in HR or in the training department. And I was accustomed to delivering all types of training. Way back then, I wasn't doing keynote speeches, although I do that most of the time now. And so people kept saying I should do diversity work, but when I would ask the question why, their answer generally was, well, you're black and female, so that automatically qualifies you. Well, that really was not a very good answer to me, because I felt like you really needed to have more information, more passion for it, etc. However, when you're looking for an answer to something, especially something related to, like this around my business, then things kept popping up and started happening in my life, not necessarily both professionally as well as in my work life, that made me know that I needed to do this work. I did not like what I saw happening earlier, in the early 80s. I didn't like it. The diversity work was coming across very judgmental, and I thought that's exactly the opposite of what it should be. And so by 1988, I recognized that I should at least pay more attention to this. So by 1990, I think it was 1990, I started doing more work in the area, just slowly as I was developing my expertise. And then in 1991, I had the opportunity to go to South Africa for the first time. And the work that I was doing there, and the things that happened in my life personally while I was there, helped me know that this really was why I was put on the planet, and it has since become a passion. So it's really something I do 24/7, and the more I can help people understand one another, the more it can impact their lives in a positive way in all aspects of their lives, not just work.
Okay. Is this growing? Because it seems to me there's some civil unrest the last 5 to 7 or 8 years. Have you noticed that growing due to that, or what are your thoughts?
It's interesting. I just wrote a really brief article about that. Someone had said, well, is there a renaissance of diversity and inclusion? What's happening? And back in the let me think when it was the mid 80s, before I had actually started my business, I had the privilege of hearing a professor from Wayne State University. His name was Bernie Landau, Dean Emeritus from Wayne State University. He would come to speak to a group of leaders, and I was managing the seminars at the time. And he said to them, and he happened to be a white male, and he said, there's going to be unrest again. And, in the early and mid 80s, we were just coming off of the civil rights movement and all of that. And people were quite amazed that he said that. And he said, mark my words, whenever there will be a recession, whenever people feel like they are, there's scarcity or that they're losing something, they need to blame it on someone. And so the easiest way to blame is through race, is to, white people blaming on black people and vice versa, primarily. And interestingly enough, over time, that has been true. Whenever there is scarcity, there seems to be unrest. And of course, now we are seeing quite a good deal of it, with race relations in particular. On the other side, we're also seeing much more openness to people different than whoever the majority might be. So, now there's same-sex marriage. There's more dialogue about people who are transgender, which never would have happened 20 years ago. So what I experience, given that I do this work and I'm focused on it all the time, is that there is tension, and there's also progress. And in the area of unconscious bias and helping people understand unconscious bias, which is an awful lot of my focus now, I think more people are recognizing that it's not about us and them and, good guys, bad guys kind of thing, but that the more we all realize that we have biases and then can dialogue about it instead of putting it under the table, then we can turn this unrest into something positive. So, I think there'll always be some level of unrest about something. And, hopefully it won't always be specifically race relations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very interesting. Well, unfortunately, it seems like your job will be evergreen, because
yes, I won't be working my way out of a job. That's true.
No, I don't think so. Well, Lenora, how can people get a hold of you should they want to talk to you further, speak, and that kind of thing?
You bet. So the one way is via email. If you go to my website, which is www, of course, ubuntuglobal.com. That's spelled U, B as in boy, U, N as in never, T as in Tom, U, and then the word global, ubuntuglobal.com. And the email is Lenora@ubuntuglobal. And by the way, Ubuntu means I am because we are because I am, which is a Zulu proverb that I learned on one of my trips to South Africa.
Ubuntu. Okay. Very interesting. Well, Lenora, thank you so much for giving us a peek into your speaking business and how you're helping people. That was very, very interesting information.
Thank you so much. And gosh, the time flies. Well, I look forward to listening to your show more often.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.